Hey there. What's happening? Better Sax watchers, viewers everywhere around the world. Give me a shout in the comments. Let me know you're here and tell me where you're tuning in from. I am in the south of France, as usual, at home. Uh, but I'd love to know where you are watching from. And it's great when we do these. We usually get people from all over the world. And that's super interesting. If you're watching the replay, thanks for tuning into the replay. You could still tell us where you're tuning in from on the replay as well. And today I've got a guest with us who you're going to find very interesting if you're not already familiar with him. While we wait for a bunch of people to tune in, let me just go over a couple bits of news. First thing is, let me just say hello to my buddy Matt, great saxophone player. What's up, bro? First thing is the Better Sax alto saxophones. This one back here. Starting February 1st, in 3 or 4 days, they're going to be available at sweetwater.com. And I'm very excited about that. And they're going to be carrying all the different Better Sax products. So if you've been waiting to get one of the Better Sax altos, you're going to be able to get it from Sweetwater, which is like the greatest online music store ever. Another announcement is that all Better Sax courses are on sale till the end of January. So again, a few more days. You can save up to 40% on all those courses. Just go to bettersax.com and there'll be a little thing that pops up that says sale. Just click the button there and you get all the sale prices for the next few days. So make sure you take advantage of that if you're not already enrolled in loads of Better Sax courses. All right, let me say hello to a few people here. Thomas from Germany. We got Timothy from Michigan. We got some guy from British Columbia. And Fluppa99 from Berlin. And we got Don from Houston, Texas. We got Vladimir, Long Island boy living in Fort Lauderdale. I'm also a Long Island boy. Some people don't know that. Newcastle in the UK. Okay, we got Mexico. We got, okay, keep them coming in. Monroe Township, New Jersey. Okay, we got Spokane, Washington. Oh, this is cool. Potsdam, Germany. I went to college in Potsdam, New York. And we got Strasbourg, France. Bienvenue. And we got Georgia, East Dublin, Georgia. We got Hungary. Wow, you guys from all over. Somebody is here from Australia. Great. Idaho, California, Oklahoma. Wow, you guys are coming from all over the place. Wait, what's this one? Slovakia, Spain. Okay, great to have everybody. Ooh, we got Hawaii. What time is it in Hawaii? Late at night? Utah. Wow, somebody's up early in Utah. Puglia, Italy. We got somebody from Milano as well. Ciao, Alberto. We got Nigeria tuning in, Michael. All right. And Jesse, originally from the Philippines, now in California. Okay. I'll try to say hello to as many of you guys as possible. I love having you from all over. Wow. Lima, Peru. We got lots of continents. We even got Russia in the house. Pennsylvania. All right. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And everybody on the replay. Keep saying hello in the comments. We'll try to look at them. And listen, we're gonna talk lots of saxophone stuff today. Our guest has a new book out, which we're going to talk a lot about. And I've been going through it, finding so much really interesting stuff in there, different perspectives on familiar themes for me and for anybody who's studying jazz and improvisation. You're going to find a lot of stuff in there and a lot of interesting ways to practice and things to do when studying improvisation on the saxophone. His name is Tim Armacost, and he is a Grammy-winning saxophonist living in New York. He is a professor at Queens College, where I went to do my master's degree. We were actually overlapped for a period of time, and that's where we actually met, at Queens College a long time ago. He plays with the New York Standards Quartet, and he's just a great saxophone player and a great guy, and now author of this newest book called The Jazz Saxophone Book. Please welcome Tim Armacost. Hey, Tim.
Well, hello there. Thanks for having me, Jay. Nice to be here.
Yeah.
That was so cool seeing all those people tuning in from around the world.
That's my favorite part. I could just stop the whole thing right now.
Man, Hawaii and Peru. And what was it? The guy was called Some Guy.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's got crazy names. We got Ghana. We got there's a lot of better sax watchers in Africa.
Is that so? Wow.
Oh, yeah. Well, all over the world. But it's fantastic. Oh, and look at this. Say hi to Tim, my teacher.
Venus. Hello, come on.
Yeah, because you lived in Amsterdam for a long time, didn't you?
I started my career there, actually. I moved there in 1980, dating myself here, 1985, after I graduated from college. And I kind of just went for an adventure and amazingly started finding gigs. Actually, even more amazingly, found a place to live. That's one of the hardest things to do in Amsterdam. There are no affordable apartments outside of this sort of system. The system for the people who live there, basically. And if you're an outsider coming in, it's very difficult. It takes time to get into that system. You're not locked out, but it takes time. And I found a place. I landed in this beautiful little apartment, which was just unheard of. And things just kind of fell into place for me, and I wound up staying for 7 years. It was
yeah. When you find a place to live in a city like that, you can't give up the crib. You gotta
and
you gotta hold it down.
With a phone, and the rent was cheap. Actually, interestingly, now in retrospect, the rent was pretty expensive for Amsterdam, by Amsterdam standards. But I had brought some money from the States, and at the time, the interest rate, not the interest rate, but the exchange rate from dollars to guilders before the euro was pretty favorable. So that kind of I kind of bought 3 or 4 months of rent just because I was lucky with the way that timing went.
Yeah.
And when I ran out of money, I started playing on the streets and finding a way to make enough money to eat, and then that built into joining some bands and finding my way into the scene.
Yeah, man. Well, that's Europe has been kind of like a saving grace for so many American musicians, not just American musicians from all over the world, European musicians. It's a place where having a career as a musician was more possible for longer than in it kind of died out slower than in the States, where the gigs kind of dried up a bit faster earlier in the States, whereas in Europe in the 90s and 2000s and there was still more regular work. It was easier to find.
Well, I think the general attitude towards culture is a little more, say, enlightened, in that there's government support for gigs, and it's being a jazz musician is considered something worthwhile in Europe, whereas in the States it's sort of like, oh, you're a jazz musician, what do you do to make money? And Europe, it's a lot more accepting and supportive, so.
They still will ask you that question, though. What do you do to make
probably
money?
Everywhere. It's not just the States they ask you that question.
Yeah, but no, I see what you mean, and for sure, me living in France, that's it's tough. It's once you discover, as a musician or artist or sort of creative person, once you discover what's possible in other societies, it's like, ooh, well, it makes going back to the States tough. Although I did go back anyway. So let's talk about your book. This is the chat. Do you have a copy of it? You can hold it up.
I do. I have it underneath my stack of Chuck Scher books that live on my piano. So we'll do a little plug for Chuck. See, this one is, I want you to see how messed up this binding is. He makes them stronger now. But I say that to say, I've been using this book for 15, 16 years, and
Wow,
it's
I've
still
got that.
on my piano, and I still get good information and inspiring ideas out of it.
Yeah, I have
So
that book too. That's the jazz piano book
the jazz
by
piano book
Mark
by Mark
Twain.
Boone.
So that was so part of the inspiration for your title came from that book.
Yeah, so that's kind of a theme of Chuck's company, the XYZ book. And and man, I got to tell you, when we first started talking about me, so I went to the Gen conference 2 years ago in New Orleans, and I went down to see him. I've met him a few times, and I went down to see him, and I had an idea of pitching a short book. I had an idea of a skinny little book about melody. I thought it would be nice because there aren't that many resources about melody. You can find a harmony book, all over the place. But how do you make melodies? How do you practice to make melody? That was something I found really interesting, and I went to meet him to pitch that idea, and he goes, "Well, yeah, that'd be a nice chapter in a longer book," and and so I said, "Okay, let me think about that." And I woke up the next morning and I had this idea about the anatomy of a song, which became the second section of the book. How could I help, or how could I share the experience that I've gathered over the years on the bandstand about the things like playing an intro to a song, counting a song off. What do you do when you're not playing your solo? How does trading actually work? These really practical things that people who haven't spent a lot of time on the bandstand might find mysterious. I had an idea that would make a really interesting book. And I'm going to tie this story off in a second. So I pitched that idea to Chuck, and he was like, "Yeah, that sounds like a really nice direction. Let's put an outline together," and which we did. And then it's going to be called the Jazz Saxophone Book. Was where we went with that. And I was like, "Geez, man, Dave Liebman is still alive, and all these other incredible saxophonists and educators are still around. How am I going to write the jazz saxophone?" But because it was for Chuck Scher, I thought, okay, I will do that, and I'll try to write a book that's good enough to merit that title.
Yeah, so it ended up having to be a lot more. You had to kind of put a lot more into it than the original plan.
Like really a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, that the pandemic hit 3 months later after we started talking about it, or yeah, 3 months later. So all of a sudden, I was just alone in my house, with my wife, and with no gigs. 2 years worth of gigs were just wiped off my schedule. So I decided that I was going to try to behave like what I've read authors do, which is to get up in the morning and sit down at their desk and try to write for 3 or 4 hours. And I was relatively successful at that. I was able to make a pretty disciplined routine about just getting up, having my cup of tea and a little breakfast, and then going to work at my desk. And I took a couple of months off during the course of the 2 years it took to write, but that was pretty much what I did. The first job of the day was to spend a few hours on the book, and then I do the other things I was doing. But okay, so all that to say, here is the Jazz Saxophone Book. It finally exists.
Wow, great, man. So, and the binding, it's more of like I'm waiting to get my copy of this.
Yes, it's coming next week, I promise.
Oh, you're coming over to Holland next week.
I'm going to teach in Groningen for a week at the Prince Claus Conservatory.
All right.
That's all kinds of guests, but often jazz guys from New York come to be a guest for a week there. So
Okay, I didn't realize that was so soon. So, so is this something open to the public, or is this?
There are some concerts. Ordinarily, there are concerts that happen during the course of the week that you spend there as a guest. But I think this time, because of COVID, it's probably going to be just teaching in the school and relatively low key. I was interesting because it's the first time I've traveled overseas in 2 years. I've done a few gigs outside of New York in these last 6 months, but this is the first invitation I got to fly internationally and take on Omicron.
Yeah, it's not fun traveling these days. Every time I do it, it's
crazy, right? So I feel like I'm gonna be okay. My only real worry is if I get sick there and have to quarantine for a week before I can come back to the States. That would be a drag. I've heard of people getting caught, in that situation.
Yeah.
That'd be a drag. But I feel like, touch wood, if I get sick, with I took the vax and the boost, so I feel like if I get sick, I'm not gonna have to go to the hospital again. Touch wood.
Yeah. All right. Well, hope everything goes smooth with that. I am still looking forward to getting my book, and I love physical copies of books, especially these sort of books like like the Mark Levine jazz piano book. And you have another one there. Can you show us the other one you got, which is another one I love?
The two others that I still routinely spend time with. So this one is David Berkman's Jazz Harmony book. We were talking about how that's kind of a theme for Chuck Scher. The Jazz Harmony book, the Jazz Saxophone book, the Jazz Piano book. David is my co-leader in the New York Standards Quartet. We have very long, very fruitful association. And even though he's one of my best friends and I spend a lot of time with him on the road, I took his course at Queens College, even as a professor. I audited his course. So I bought the book when I was taking his course. And even having been, working with this stuff for 20 years by the time I took that course, it still, opened my eyes to different ways of thinking about harmony, helped me master some things that were a little hazy. That's a great book. And then the last one that is the most recent one.
Okay, I just want to talk about David's book first, though.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Because as I was going, that's another book that I love.
Yeah.
And I love the way he wrote it and his style and the humor in it, and just it's because these books is tricky when you're writing a book like this, and what's your approach? Is it purely academic?
Yeah.
Or are you allowed to have personality, and are you allowed to have fun with it at all?
Yeah.
So I love the way he wrote that.
Hilarious.
About the Jazz Harmony book by David Bergman. I just love it. It's entertaining, and it's fun to read. And he has such a great way of explaining harmony and simplifying.
Yeah.
And maybe part of it is taking out all of that, that academic, sounding so academic and serious, and kind of and bringing things a bit more down to earth. So I highly recommend, as do you, and anybody pretty much has gone through that the Jazz Harmony book. If anybody wants to know more about jazz harmony, you got to have that book. It's a must.
Yep.
And so as I was reading through your book, I was reminded of David's book and how, so did you get some inspiration from the way David put his book together?
I would have loved to be as funny as David.
Well, yeah.
But I'm simply not. But yeah, so when I was listening to you just now, the thing that occurred to me is something that I touch on in my book, which is, what are we practicing for? What am I practicing to become? What am I trying to become with all these hours I'm spending on the saxophone? Nobody would answer that question, well, I want to be a really robotic, stiff player. Nobody would answer that question that way, right? Nobody wants to become that. So don't practice that way then. and a lot of the stuff that comes to us in an academic context, as you pointed out, and also kind of like there's this idea that you have to put in the work. And that's true, but the process of doing that work can be fun. And what I'm trying to do is what I'm trying to practice to become is a guy who sounds like he's having a ball on the bandstand. So I try to make that, I try to have my practice sessions be fun. And that's one of the ways that's one of the things that I tried to do in the book was to help people get to a place where you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh man, I can't wait to get back to what I was working on yesterday. That was so much fun. If that's where you're coming from, then you're going to become a fun improviser. So rather than funny, which I don't have like David Berkman has, I'm going for let's be inspired and have fun and find things to do that are gas, and that way that spirit will be will be inhabiting the music that I play.
Yeah, and let me just, for anybody who's tuning in now, we're talking with Tim Armacost about the new book, the Jazz Saxophone book. And where can people find this book, Tim?
Yes, thank you for asking. Share Music Company, sharemusic.com. That's SHER music.com. That's the place. And my lovely blue cover that was designed by Matthew Heister, who's also a Queens College alumni. My nice blue cover is right there when you land at sharemusic.com. You can see it easily, and then one click and you're there. So at the moment, if you're in Europe or further overseas than Europe from where I sit, you can order the PDF version right now. So you can have something in your hands right away. The physical copies, we've been hearing about the supply chain issues with COVID and all that. So there's a bit of a bottleneck right now getting physical copies to Europe and further afield. And if I understand it right, end of April, middle of April, beginning of May is when the whole world will be saturated with the jazz saxophone.
I've just put a couple links in the chat for anyone. So if you want to click on those links to check it out. Now, the first link was the link to the book at sharemusic.com. But there's also this link to a YouTube playlist,
yes,
a YouTube channel that has several videos that kind of go along with the book. And I've got one that we can watch. It's about, and it's kind of one of these things you're talking about, how you've kind of come up with all these ways to practice that are much less robotic, yet they're still working towards a specific goal.
Yeah.
But you're kind of getting saxophone players, your students, you want to activate the creative part of their brain while they're practicing, rather than, what we kind of typically end up, the trap we fall into is kind of the very academic, robotic, practicing scales, practicing patterns, a lot of repetition. There's nothing wrong with that stuff, but it's at the, we often will neglect that creative side. And that's also, as you pointed out, can be a lot more fun. And it's good to have some sort of a balance. And you definitely, you don't want to ignore this creative side altogether, which is something that I think a lot of people do. I've certainly practiced that way quite a bit myself.
Well, so. and I think it's valid also in the sense that there is a certain amount of work that you have to do to get the saxophone, to get your ability to play the saxophone to the point where you can imagine something and bring it out through the horn. So there's a way in which doing the exercises that we're taught to do is necessary. But what I try to do is take that necessary work and make it creative right from the beginning. Yeah. And that way you're killing two birds with one stone. You're laying the foundation, but you're also looking at what that foundation you just laid and went, wow, that looks kind of cool. Let me take this brick and put it over here and see what happens when I do that.
Yeah.
And make it more fluid and dynamic rather than there's this work that I have to do. That's the thing that I'm always fighting against is I have to do this work. We can kind of do the work and then pat ourselves on the back and go, I worked really hard today, but that's not really going to get us to having a beautiful, interesting improvisation voice.
Yeah, let's talk. I want to play this clip that I have, and this is about one of many exercises that you put forth in this book that I was mentioning, sort of creative. So what is this? This is where you're taking a melodic idea and think of it as a question, and then having responses to those questions.
Yeah. So you picked one of the most advanced concepts in the whole book. So let's back up just a little bit and set it up. So one of the things that I do, actually the thing that I do when I first sit down with my saxophone at the piano in the morning, is I try to improvise with melody. And it's okay if I play a little bit. Maybe I'll just set up this video. So. So one of the things that I do right at the beginning of the day is I try to play some melodic questions and answers. So I usually just drop my my hand at the piano and I play a fifth. Ooh, that sounds a little spicy this morning. Let's say, okay, that's G. So I play a fifth at the piano, and the very first thing I do is to just try to improvise from my mind. Uh, what I mean by from my mind is singing melodies and playing them on the saxophone. And I try to see if I can have a little bit of dialogue with myself. So the only rule for this section of my practice day is I only play stuff that I'm hearing. And I try to imagine a melody that I've never played before right now in this moment. Okay, so that's an example of just a few short phrases that I've never played before that I was imagining in my mind before I played them. Never played that melody before. Maybe I'll turn that into a song after we're done today. So that's the thing that I start my day with is play something simple enough that I can call it a melody, and then listen to see where that is going to go. And if I can do that, it fires up my melodic imagination first thing in the day, which is for me the kind of foundation of improvising anyway. So why wouldn't I start my day with melody? Okay, so two other things about the video. One of the other things I'm trying to demonstrate is that I take a picture of myself, a video of myself playing, and then I listen back to it to see if I was the drummer, am I going to be able to hear what what Tim Armacost is saying? So if I'm the drummer, am I going to feel Tim Armacost's beat? Oh. Is the music that I'm playing conveying a sense of time and swing? And so I'm going to click along with it while I'm listening. I'll do it now when you play it. And that's what I'm checking for. That's one of the baseline things I'm checking for when I listen to myself play. If I was the drummer, would I enjoy playing along with that? And then the third thing is, in this particular exercise that you're gonna play, I play a couple of A sections of rhythm changes in B flat, concert B flat. And what I do is I play along a little ways, and then I play a melody in the last two bars of the form. And I try to keep that melody in mind and answer it the next time around. So it's the idea of sending a kind of a line out at the end of an A section with an unanswered question and then answering it 8 bars later. That's something I heard Benny Green do when he was playing with Freddie Hubbard many, many years ago when I was living in Holland. And it's something I've aspired to do as well as he did ever since then. So there's a pretty long setup for the
Okay, well, let's have a listen, and then everyone, we're going to listen to it. It's about a minute, and then we can talk a little bit more about what it is that you're doing here.
Okay, so I said do da da dee at the top, at the end of the first A section, and then I said go da 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 dee da. So I tried to find my way back to the first phrase I said and answer it, setting it home, setting the whole thing down.
All right, so what one of the ways we would often practice something like rhythm changes, like, all right, outline the chords, or fit this bit of language or 2-5-1s or whatever
Right.
over it. And, you know, we're not saying anything's wrong with that, but, you know, maybe we can do a bit more of this thinking like, oh, let me just play a melody and, you know, make it make sense, whether it be taking a melodic fragment and reusing it, repeating it,
Yep.
or the purpose of this video, I believe, was to take a melodic idea and then have a response to it. So, you know, everything that you're playing, you want it to kind of glue together like a real melody should.
There it is. Yeah. Yeah. Practicing the glue, finding the glue. And that's, I think, for rhythm changes, that's another thing I talk about a lot in the book is rhythm changes is a great example of a tune where on a fundamental level, all the chords you get a, you know, a chord every 2 beats for the A section, you know, the first 4 bars of the A section. There's a chord every 2 beats, but fundamentally, at the most basic level, they're all in the key of B flat. So you can ignore the chords and just hear, you know. Ba dee da da ba dee dee ba dee da 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 dee da da dee dee da 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 da. I can just sing in B flat. I don't have to think about anything, and that's a beautiful place to be able to be. And that's for me. I try to find the bass line when I have a 2-5-1 in F over 4 bars. My bass line is, okay, I'm in the key of F. I can just sing in F. I don't have to think about the chords. And then, because I'm a jazz musician, I'm going to start addressing the different possibilities of the chords. But I usually take a little bit of time to do that. So I'm gonna start redefining the chords a little deeper into my solo in order to up the ante, you know, to raise the tension and keep the story unfolding. But I like to get that baseline level where there's nothing to think about, just sing.
Yeah, and it was a lot of the book is concentrating on melody and using melody as practice material, as a launching pad for ideas for improvisation, and all of those things can end up getting neglected when we're practicing jazz in some of the
Yeah.
more traditional ways.
Which was my original impetus for writing the book. I was thinking we've gotten, excuse me, we've gotten to the point where the academic side, where jazz education is so well developed now. It's a great thing. It's fantastic that there's as much jazz education as there is. But in an academic environment, the easiest thing to teach is the sort of mathematical stuff, the harmony stuff. You can put that on a blackboard and talk about it, and it all makes sense, and it's really not that different from teaching math, which is not a criticism. It's just that's the easiest thing to do in an academic environment. It kind of feels the most legitimate in an academic environment. But the thing about this music is that it's something that has to come from your body and your spirit. Those are not really, you know, typical academic subjects. So my original idea, as I said, for writing the book was to try to address some of those sort of, how can we practice those less academic things, because they're really important in the making of this music. And that, as we talked about, grew into a monster that took me 2 years to write.
So if, you know, one of my first questions for you would be, who is this book for? Who is the student that you would have in mind that would benefit from this book?
I tried to write it in a way that was clear enough that somebody just picking up the saxophone, well, that's not quite true. I was going to say somebody picking up the saxophone for the first time. I wrote in the very beginning that the book assumes a basic knowledge of the saxophone and you know how to put the reed on the mouthpiece and with the ligature. You know, it assumes a basic familiarity with the music and the saxophone. But I wrote it in a way that was intended for somebody who has never improvised before to get started. And then I tried to go deep enough that somebody who's been doing it for 20 years might find something in the book that would be inspiring.
Mhm.
So it's meant to be a companion for your whole life of improvising. That's the idea. And I also, my teacher Charlie Shoemake out in California, he taught all instruments. He's a vibes player, and he taught all instruments. So I also tried to write it in a way that if you play trumpet, you can still get good information about improvisation. It's saxophone focused, so most of the examples are saxophone players. I gave Tom Harrell and maybe Freddie Hubbard and Bud Powell a few other examples. Herbie Hancock, that are non-saxophone vocabulary examples. So the idea is it's for anybody who wants to learn to improvise and have fun practicing. That's maybe the best answer to the question. It's for anybody who practices an instrument and wants to get better at improvising.
Yeah, so it's appropriate for people who are very advanced. You know, like I was looking at it and I was like, wow, there's a lot of great stuff in here. I could spend a lot of time with this book. But I could also, you know, me 30 years ago, I could have also spent a lot of time with that book. So, you know, I kind of wanted to hear it from you, but that was what I got from it. And similar to how the David Berkman book and the Mark Levine book are as well. Those are books that you can, and if you have those, you'll be working with them for decades.
Yeah. They're companions.
Yeah.
So, and another thing that I tried to do, which didn't happen for me, maybe because my mom was a piano teacher. So you know, maybe I didn't want to study piano because that was my mom's zone. You know how that is. You don't want to study music with your parents. Some people do, some people don't. I was a bit of a rebellious kid, so I didn't want to study with my mom. So one of the things I tried to do in the book was integrate knowledge of the piano right from the beginning of improvisation. If I had done it in the way I now teach it, I think I probably could have mastered some of the concepts quicker. So my hope also is to help people get better faster than
yeah. That's a big part of teaching, isn't it? Is don't make the same mistake I made, you know.
Help the next generation get better.
Yeah.
You know.
If only it were that easy. But the thing is we all end up being our own best teacher, and you kind of have to learn from those mistakes too. It's a big part of it. And I try to tell people all the time, you know, don't get too frustrated. It's a long process. It's a very long process, and you have to look at it very long term, and don't expect immediate results.
I love that in your videos. I love how you keep coming back to the idea of, look, this is not a shortcut. You're still going to have to do the work. It's work. There's work. And my thing is, it's work, but it can also be fun. So, you know, together we're hopefully going to help people get to this stuff quickly.
Yeah. I've highlighted a bunch of things in the book. Then maybe I'll go through a few of those. But one of the things, and I used it as the title because I needed a title for my, for this YouTube video, was the Jackie McLean quote. Someone asked him how much you practice, and he said 365 hours a year. I thought that was great. And the idea is you just need consistency. That's what he's saying. You need to practice every day, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, whatever. The idea is doing it every day, consistency over a long period of time. That's what gets your results.
Yeah.
Not doing 6-hour sessions, it's about the consistency is more important than the quantity of time.
Yeah. And it's also a kind of established idea now that Charlie Parker practiced 15 hours a day, and Sonny Rollins went up on the bridge and practiced 15 hours a day. That's a kind of, and Coltrane famously would play a gig, for 4 hours. He'd play 4 hours on the gig and then go back in the bathroom at the Vanguard and say, I just couldn't get to this thing. I need to practice another hour. That kind of myth of jazz musicians as crazy practicers is in place, and there's truth in it, in the sense that, like we've been saying in this segment, there is a certain amount of work that you have to do to get your skills to the point where you can deliver, and that's just unavoidable. So you can practice twice 365 hours a year, or 4 times that, or 5 times that during that period when you're trying to get everything together. But as you say, the point is consistency. And the corollary to that is one of my teachers said to me, 10 minutes a day is better than 60 minutes on Saturday. And
Sure.
and if you think, when I thought about just a couple of days ago, I was thinking about this, and I thought, yeah, right. If you practice 60 minutes on Saturday, the first 30, you're trying to remember what you did last week.
Yeah.
So now you just wasted 30. Now you're only practicing for 30 minutes, really.
Yeah.
But if you touch it every day, then that familiarity builds, and the concepts,
Yeah, and so many things take a month before you see the results of doing it for 10 or 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
So many things, if you spend too much time on it, you burn out very quickly and you don't want to practice anymore because they're boring.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I try to do, and I've had success with. It's like, okay, you don't have to spend hours doing this thing. Just do a little bit every day, long periods of time, vary your practice sessions up. And I liked the section in your book where you're talking about, where you have this, your first hour of your practice session broken up into 3 20-minute sections.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love checking out, all the different books and everything that all the great educators out there are doing. And I love getting all these different ideas and then trying them out. And I recommend to everybody, get these books and check out people's courses and things, because you're going to get all these different perspectives, and developing a good diet and regime of practicing saxophone over a lifetime. You need a lot of ideas, and some are really going to stick with you and fit your personality and, what works for you, some less so. But if you get all these different perspectives, and at some point you may even come up with your own ideas that are original. And then be able to share those with other people. But you need to have as many different perspectives as possible. And even the ones you don't agree with are still serving you in some way.
Absolutely. Because it helps you to determine what your aesthetic is.
Yeah. And you might end up changing your mind about those 10 years down the road or later, which I've done many times.
Yeah. I was just talking about that yesterday with somebody, about how I had some guys over to play at the house yesterday. And we were talking about how something that I might have experienced when I was 22 as old-fashioned. Oh man, that's old-fashioned. I want to, when I was growing up, it was Michael Brecker, right? He was setting the bar, and setting it very high, technically speaking, especially, but also harmony. I mean, harmony. He had everything. The guy was unbelievable, and that's what everybody my age was interested in, was trying to figure out what he was doing. And of course, that just keeps going up through the generations. So somebody comes along with something new to say, and everybody kind of gravitates towards that. So at the moment when I was just starting out, I really wanted to figure out what he was doing. And so something Lester Young played in the context of what Michael Brecker was able to do sounded old-fashioned to me. And only now, being able to listen, knowing what the history is, knowing where the music was when Lester was playing it, and being able to hear it on those terms, now I can listen and go, oh my God, listen to how he's swinging those quarter notes. You never heard Michael Brecker go 2, 3, 4, just play these incredibly beautiful laid back quarter notes. You don't hear Michael Brecker doing that. He's flying over top of the music, playing all this stuff. And now, with some perspective, I can listen to Lester Young and hear what's beautiful about it on its terms, and then see if I can use that.
That reminds me of the great Michael Brecker quote, where he said, "If you transcribe my solos, you are my student. But if you transcribe the music of the people that I transcribed and studied, then you are my peer."
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Very typically humble for Michael Brecker, also becoming a peer of his.
Yeah. Like, no, we're still not your peer. I transcribed to Charlie Parker solo. You're not the peer, but
No. That's funny.
Cool, man. Well, listen, I just want to once more remind everybody that we're talking about Tim Armacost's new book, the Jazz Saxophone book, which is available from Share Music, and it's out now. You could get the physical copy in the States. And where would we go to get is it timarmacost.com is where we can get the digital copy?
Sharemusic.com is where you can get the digital copy,
Okay.
and the videos live on YouTube, and also you can also access the videos via my website, timarmacost.com.
Okay, yeah, because there's a bunch of videos. We showed a clip from one of them earlier, and all those videos are on YouTube, so people can kind of just go to your website, check out those videos where you might get inspired and be like, oh yeah, this is for me. This is something that I want to check out and dig a bit deeper into.
Yeah.
So your website is it timarmacost.com?
Yes, it is. And if you go to YouTube and you want to get sort of straight to the stuff in the book, you can search Tim Armacost and the Jazz Saxophone book, or just the Jazz Saxophone book, and that'll take you to my landing page where you can see that. There's two things there, actually. One of the things that it seems a little less apparent to people, which is there's the videos associated with the book that I made, but I also made a curated playlist for each chapter. So chapter 3, I cited a bunch of jazz musicians and gave transcribed answers in transcribed examples in the book. There's a playlist for everything that appears in chapter 3 on YouTube also. So you can hear the action.
Yeah, and that's so important, and it's something that we can do now, because this is something maybe like when I had the Mark Levine book, there's all these discographies and things listed, or even in the Jamie Abersolds that we used to study with, there would all be all these records, but you had to actually own the records to, to listen to them, or have some sort of access to physical copies of some of these records. And it wasn't that easy to get all these things. So nowadays with YouTube, you can just listen to anything.
It's a fantastic
library with all this stuff is in your pocket.
It's like the library at Alexandria.
Yeah.
It contains all of human knowledge now.
Yeah. It's YouTube. Man, YouTube is a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is.
So, and listen, and as I was saying to Tim earlier that these things, whenever I have these conversations, we could just go on forever. And I'm looking, it's already, over 45 minutes long, our talk. So you guys, who's ever watching, you are more than welcome to put some questions in the comments, and we'll try to get to them. I'm just throwing it out there now because get your questions in now. We can try to check them out before we run out of time. So if you got any questions for Tim, put them in the comments. If you have questions for me, put them, send them to me somewhere else, because for now, let's have questions for Tim and his book. And Jack says, glad you introduced Tim to all of us here.
Sorry about that. I just realized my computer was answering my phone.
Oh yeah, I hate that. I
thought I had all the basics.
My computer does that too. Okay, so I've got a couple questions.
Okay.
That I wanted to ask, but sometimes my questions can turn into very long answers. So, but let me just ask you this simple question. What's the single most important lesson you've learned as a musician?
For me, the essence of improvisation is singing. My singing voice has there's no filter. There's nothing getting in the way. If I hear a melody, la da 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 dee da 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 dee dee da da. I don't have a good singing voice, but there's nothing impeding my singing directly what I'm hearing in my mind. It just comes out. It's kind of magical. And connecting that to the saxophone, making the saxophone the extension of that effortless singing voice, that to me is the essence of being a saxophone improviser. So how do we work on that? That's the thing that I try to work on every day, so that so that the saxophone is not getting in the way, or I'm not just doing saxophonistical things. I also want to display my technique. You know, I'm a show off like everybody else. I want to show what I can do, but fundamentally, I want the music to be coming from my singing voice. And so most of what I do practicing is to connect my singing voice with my what, you know, to bring my singing voice, my internal singing voice, bring that out with the saxophone as the vehicle.
Yeah. You are the instrument. A lot of times we think of the instrument as the instrument, but
Yeah.
and when as long as we're thinking that way, and you know, and then we're like, oh, my saxophone isn't working. But if you're thinking more like you are the instrument, you are the music maker, and the sax, like you say, get the saxophone out of the way.
Yeah.
And it's easy. It's much easier said than done. But if
Yep.
that is the, you know, if you're aiming for that, you're already, you know, going to be going off in a good direction.
Yeah, and also it's not magic. You can practice it every day. When I was starting, there was nobody who could talk to me about that, and I just had to kind of figure it out over time. And what I do now, as I demonstrated earlier, is I sit down at the piano and I play a fifth, and I listen in my mind for a melody, and then I see if I can play it on the saxophone without you know, play exactly what I hear in my mind onto the saxophone. I can practice that every day. It's still mysterious in the sense that I don't know where that music comes from that's in my mind. That's a mystery to me still. But it's not mysterious that I can ask my technique to deliver the melody that I'm hearing in my mind. I can work on that every day and get better at it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff in your book about exactly that, which is great stuff to work on. Let's check out some of these questions that are coming in, and this is, you know, I see this sort of a question a lot. A lot of people have this idea, you know, they love the saxophone, but they, you know, they're a bit intimidated by jazz, and that's totally normal, I think, because you know you can't. It's not easy access music, and it's on purpose. It's by design that it's, you know, it's sophisticated, and it takes some, you have to listen to it. You have to develop an appreciation for it. It's not, you know, Britney Spears. It's not with the stuff that goes on the radio that is instantly likable.
Right.
It's different. So, you know, maybe you have a good answer for this.
Yeah, I have two answers. Along the lines that you were just oh shoot, I lost my train of thought because I saw the question on the screen there. So I see on the screen, what about us folks who don't necessarily want to play jazz? So I'll address that, which is the concepts are the same. The concept still works. When I'm playing in a situation where I'm reading somebody else's music, and it's not about me improvising, but I'm delivering the music that somebody else wrote, what I want to get to is that I'm hearing that music in my mind. I want the notes on the page to be firing my singing voice to sing what I'm hearing and then play that on the saxophone. So I use the same process when I'm studying music from a page. So I wanna make it deeper than just a mechanical exercise of reading notes and, oh, that means I press these buttons on the saxophone. I want the music that I'm reading to be firing in my mind, and I want to be delivering that through the saxophone when I play. So that's kind of my answer to, you know.
The concepts are the same. You know, this is the thing that I try to explain to people. The concepts are the same, and music is really music.
Yeah.
Whether it's Beethoven, who you quoted earlier, or Coltrane, you know, there's so much overlap in everything, and we compartmentalize genres of music.
Yeah.
But that's kind of silly because we're still dealing with the same notes, the same chords, the same chord progressions, the same rhythms, the same melodic fragment, you know, so much overlap.
Yeah.
And it takes some study of music as a listener to even realize that. But once you do, then it's like, it's just, and whether it's pop music or jazz or classical music or whatever it is, folk music, there's so much similarities. So my answer to that is, you know, don't think of it as, it's just music. If you like music, explore, and there's so much out there, and don't compartmentalize things too much. Go with what you like. It's not about genres, really.
Absolutely. I do talk about that some also in the book, that the way I search for vocabulary is not, this is something I think I'm supposed to know or supposed to work on, but I listen to music, and when I hear something that makes me go, oh, whoa, wait a minute, I need to know how to do that. When it engages me in that way, that's how I choose what to work on.
Yeah.
Something that fires my imagination. Same, of course, can be true of classical music.
Yeah. Let's check out this question from Samari Ontario. Can you touch on tone production, please, as in how to properly do long tones? What are we listening for timbre-wise, focus or spreads out? I mean, that's very specific, but go ahead.
I can give there's a video called "Make the Piano Sing." Is one of the videos. I forget which number it is, but it's kind of early on in the book, and I'll just demonstrate that. I have the great good fortune to now, 40 years into my career, finally to be the owner of a grand piano, which gives me no end of pleasure. If you don't have a grand piano, an upright piano will work. A digital piano won't work for what I'm about to demonstrate. Not sure if you'll be able to hear this on the video, but the thing that I try to do is get the piano to sing back to me. Let me see if I can just do it. I'll play. Because that's F and C at the piano. It's a little flat. Can you hear the piano ring in the background?
A little bit.
Let's do that again.
Not so much.
Okay, so it's something that's maybe easier to hear. I think it comes across in the video better than we're getting now. Maybe just because the microphones and the using the computer microphones. But the idea is, if I'm playing in tune, then the piano strings will sing back to me. And you can hear, I can hear the note that I just played ringing in the piano. And that's what that means, is the vibrations I'm creating are in sync with the vibrations of the piano strings who are vibrating against each other. So if the piano's in tune, then that vibration between the F and the C that I just played is going to be sympathetic. And if I can play a note that adds to that and creates a vibe meaning my note is going to be ringing in the piano with those two strings, then I know the note that I'm playing is rich with overtones. It's a little bit of a technical answer, but what it comes down to is it's really, really pleasurable if I can get the piano to sing back to me. Maybe that will come through a little bit more on the podcast later on, because I've recorded, here with microphones a little closer to the piano. It's possible you'll be able to hear it. But as I say, I think it came through pretty clearly on the video, which is free. Make the Piano Sing.
I put a link in the chat, so anybody can go check out that video. Right. In the description of this video, there's a link to the playlist of all the videos, so anybody can check those out. And this is a topic that you cover in your book. It's interesting, for tone, your sound. I always tell people, your sound and rhythm are like the two things that you have got to be happening, no matter what you play. And you want to be kind of practicing those two things no matter what you're practicing. That's, kind of be part of everything you're doing. And I always like when people say, okay, this is a great way to kill two birds at one stone, practice two different things at once. So now, I don't have a grand piano in my house either. But now, that gives me another excuse to want to get one.
There you go. Great investment.
Okay. I think we got time for maybe one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up. Someone said earlier, Okay, there's two questions here. Where did it go? Someone asked a question about, oh, I can't see that one now, but here's one. Oh no, that's not the one. Sorry. No, that's not the one either.
We saw that.
That's the one. Do you keep a journal of practice sessions or keep a schedule of what you want to approach? How do you organize your practice schedule?
Yeah, great question. Hi, Rick. Nice to see you here. Rick is a buddy of mine. Yes, I do keep a journal of what I'm working on. And I also set medium and long-term goals. So one of the things that I think is just human nature is we love to make a checklist and tick things off. It feels really good to tick things off. And if we do that in a longer term way, it gives a very intense feeling of satisfaction. So especially when I started out, when I first moved to Amsterdam, I had some vocabulary and I had some facility, and I could get onto I could go to a jam session and function. I was doing okay with sort of ground level function. But what I immediately discovered was that I didn't know enough tunes. I was constantly having to slink off the bandstand with my tail between my legs because I didn't know the tune that everybody else on the bandstand knew. So how did I address that problem? I was in the rhythm of learning one tune a week with Charlie Shoemake. That's just what we did, and that was a pretty deep dive into a tune. And I knew that if I worked on a tune for a week and then performed it, that was going to be that was going to stay with me. That was going to be become a part of my repertoire. If I didn't take the step of performing it, usually I'd forget. And so that's just something that's generally useful to know. There are 52 weeks in the year, and that means I can comfortably expect to learn not 52 songs a year, because that would mean I was totally consistent, which I'm not. So I set the goal a little lower to make it reachable, and I set it to be at like 40. And then I started collecting the tunes that I wanted to write, to learn. And after a year, I checked out how I did on my list. And if I learned all 40, or if I learned 40 tunes or more than that, man, I felt great. And I also knew that achieving that goal was solving a problem, which was I didn't know enough tunes. So I set a medium-term goal of 1 year, made a realistic assessment of what I could accomplish, and accomplished it, and that made me feel great. And it gave me a kind of long-term rhythm in my practicing. I did the same thing for 5 years. What do I want to do in 5 years? And I wrote down some things, who I wanted to play with. Kenny Barron was a person who 5 years from when I wrote it down, I wanted to play with somehow. And I did it. I invited him to play on my first record for Concord back in the 90s. So I set a goal that seemed crazy at the moment. I wrote it down and I got there. Made me feel fantastic. And I still love what he played on my record. So a 1 year and a 5 year goal is something that I started doing a long time ago. And then I boiled it down to the 1 hour sort of essential stuff that I want to do every day. And then if I find stuff, if I just happen across something during my practice session that I want to work on that I think is interesting and I want to get better at it, I write that down. I keep a file on my desktop, and I tap into that. And once in a while, if I feel like I can't think of anything to do, I'll check my practicing log and see if there are any loose ends that I left flying.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of Bob Mover told me, I think he attributed this to Lee Konitz, said, learn, if you learn a tune a week through the year, you have 50 tunes, because you got to take 2 weeks off to go fishing.
Yeah. Oh, for fishing, he said?
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. So that's great, man. Having those goals, writing them down like that. And this has been great. And we could kind of go on forever. We're just going to have to do another one at some point.
Love to.
On the road.
Out over the saxophone. I haven't been traditionally a saxophone geek. because I had the really good fortune to get a horn that I loved at the beginning and a mouthpiece that worked, and I just never did anything else. I've always played the same horn and the same mouthpiece and the same reed. The one thing I change is ligatures every couple of years just for fun. But I'm unusual in the sense that I don't have when the saxophone geeks start going deep into serial numbers, I get lost, you know.
Don't start watching too many of my videos, and you're gonna start ordering stuff, you know.
Well, where I was going with that was, having written this book, it's now bringing me into this community of the saxophone geeks, and I'm becoming one, which is just really fun. I'm really glad to connect with all the you know.
I'm gonna send you a t-shirt, Sax Nerd for Life.
Oh, I will wear it proudly.
Okay. That was Ben Wendell. Ben Wendell coined that phrase in one of these podcast things.
Nice.
YouTube live things. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Tim. The book is the Jazz Saxophone book from Share Music, available at sharemusic.com. My guest, Tim Armacost, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
Right on. Thanks for having me. Great to see you all virtually.
Bye-bye.